Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Haft here. This is episode number 28. Beaver Dam in the state of Wisconsin, a corrupt criminal enterprise. These are all my opinions. And this episode, I'm going to basically focus on Michael Furchow. He was my next door neighbor. And when this all first started, he came out and said he was going to sue me, take me to court, because my building was causing his to fall into the river. I hired an engineering firm, and they determined that it was his pillars that were actually washed out. He came out right after the flood and tried to be a leader. He told the people, in one of the city's press releases that, that condemnation, your property would be worthless, but actually it's a process of an eminent domain. They have to give you appraisals and have your relocation plan done before they make an offer and all this stuff. But you'll see that he knew all this stuff, and he basically was focused on himself. For the people that aren't from Beaver Dam that are watching this, he was a real estate broker, and his claim to fame kind of was he was big on the no money down mortgages and stuff. And he was basically looking out for yourself, as you'll see in here. There's an email from the DNR in the city. And it's to Richard Zeman, Trent Campbell, Bill Schwartz, Philip Fritchie, and the CC John Summers. And then this is from Tom Kennedy, the mayor of Beaver Dam. And knowing how thorough Michael is, I tend to believe he on his own consulted developed a relationship with the DNR relative to his private matters. Probably so more than any of us realize. So I feel the meeting with the DNR on the 6th of May may not be much new info for him relative to his buildings. I'll leave it up to others to weigh in on the thoughts. Therefore, I have no problem with him being asked. Maybe to Rob from the DNR can advise you. Yeah, Rob, they're talking Rob Davis again. And then from Richard Zeman on the bottom to Trent Campbell, Bill Schwartz, Philip Fritchie, Thomas Kennedy. And then the subject is, should Michael come to the meeting? This is one of their meetings. Tom, Trent, Bill, and Phil. I think that we should also invite Michael to the meeting on the 6th. I know he has his own agenda, and this is another email here. This is the CCMSA, Rob Davis, flood wall and flood fringe property owners. It's from Tom Kennedy on the bottom here. And it's to Michael Furchow, inspector, CC, the flood wall. Well, the thing is, he had 2 flood fringe properties, and they were in the floodplain, in the flood fringe actually, and he wanted them to build a flood wall to protect the buildings, including 2 of his. So he had a lot to do this, and he had a lot of influence on them. You'll see in this email. Hello all. Thank you, Tom, for making arrangements for an informational meeting about flood fringe property owners. It's very important to keep all business building owners aware of the options available for resolving the ongoing crisis and the 50% improvement limitations. And, I showed in there how they told us that everything was in the 50% rule, but it was only actually structural repair. So they kind of rendered their property economically useless. There appears to be some incorrect, questionable information relative to the efficiency of a seawall in flood-proofing structures. There are numerous documents that are contrary to such a claim from sources such as the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. We hope to have some correspondence with the very approachable DNR regarding this concept for flood-proofing. Rob, please give Michael Furchow a call at your convenience. Then the phone number. The request for funding of a seawall as detained in the Department of Commerce grant application made perfect sense. The affected property owners were dismayed to hear that the seawall would not be sufficient for the DNR. Please do not reallocate all the grant funds intended for seawall construction for is completely dismissed. So basically, at first they said, that they couldn't do it because it's unacceptable form of removing properties from from the floodplain. Many of the flood fringe property owners have multiple concerns relative to the floodproofing. One owner has already been told their basement could not be filled in due to wood construction. Additionally, most of the businesses on Front Street use their lower level for either storage or for the only restroom in the building. Therefore, it would be non-conductive to forfeit this area. We request that the meeting arranged by Mayor Tom Kennedy, Inspection Services, and the flood fringe property owners be postponed until more accurate information is obtained. It is likely that some of the properties will no longer be in the floodplain after the Celestial building and culverts have been removed, or that less costly floodproofing alternatives may be possible. An additional concern of the flood fringe property owners is the unilateral or non-unilateral designation of the flood fringe properties. Other notable properties that have been included in the flood fringe are either the former flood map or the preliminary maps are Kraft Foods and the Wisconsin Redevelopment Project, the Wyco building. Okay, now you can see why he got leverage on these people. Based on the elevations on the primary flood map, as proposed by FEMA, building elevations of certain locations are as follows. Kraft, 583. Wyco, 866. Design Plus, 86.2. Chili John's, 864.5. What's interesting is the Wyco has the highest flood elevations because their whole basement is below the river. They call it floodplain elevation. It says, we believe that the property must be 2 feet over the FEMA map benchmark high water mark to be not in the floodplain. We would expect that the removal of celestial buildings and culverts will lower the floodplain for the properties in question. Wyco will likely see limited benefit from the removal due to its distance from the extractions. But by whom? How and when will the post-celestial and culvert flood elevations be recalculated? It'd be a shame to spend money floodproofing a property that may no longer be in the floodplain after the obstructions have been eliminated from the riverway. Who will perform and pay for the LOMA, and when can it be performed? On a different note, as the city yet submitted the floodplain letter to WIDA, assuring them that the Wyco property is not in the 100-year floodplain. We believe that this is required relative to the WIDA grant application approval tax credit for funding for the Wyco development. Per Dave at WIDA, they do not have a said letter yet said. Please do not delay any possibilities and jeopardize the WIDA tax credit funding source for this great project. So he's saying it's in the floodplain, and but it's a great project because he wants them to give some leeway. And then it's got some other bull crap on there, but that's that letter, which is very interesting because he had leverage, and he played the DNR and the city. This is Mayor Kennedy's response to Michael's email. Tom Kennedy to Michael Furchow, John Summers. And it says, informational meeting with inspection service will remain scheduled for next Monday, May 18th from 11:30 to noon. A press release on the meeting has already been arranged. So what they're doing is they're saying this is a press release on it, letting people know it's going to be like a public hearing meeting. But the meeting of a half hour is not meant to be a public hearing, even though they had the press release on the meeting. Well, they're hoping no one showed up. In so many of these meetings, no one shows up. And it says, they'll provide all the answers to question relative to floodproofing. Please understand that much of this issues may be out of our expertise and control. The building inspector can, although advise us, the DNR officials to contact and explain and display the new proposed FEMA mappings and the process of any appeals. Please bring any questions. It's kind of interesting that they're sending out a press release for the meeting like it's a public thing, but they're not, if anybody shows up, then it's going to be different. Okay, I'll show you that one. Make sure I get all these, I'm not making up this stuff. Okay, yes, the demolition is starting first in the Celestial Scent buildings. This is from Paul Heinen to James Congdon, Lloyd Egan, Kenneth Johnson. They're doing the demolition essentially by hand, brick by brick, to carefully separate the buildings until they're certain of the status of the common wall. The owners of the buildings that will not be removed have been told they're responsible for weatherizing new exposed walls when the adjoining buildings are removed. Well, they told them that. Okay, it's a site-specific project. They're required to not discriminate in federal assistance for anybody in this site-specific project. And they did. They made me pay to fix my walls. It cost me $40,000 in 4 months of my life. And, you know, and this is the funny one. The status of the Fountain Inn is still unknown. That's my building. We are proceeding with enforcement, you know. According to the mayor, the word on the street is that, hey, it does advertise the antique bar. I had, you know, this beautiful Brunswick Balkan calendar for sale on eBay for $125,000. And that's the word on the street. I got like $12,000 for it. The mayor's guessing that Hateful will either attempt to sue the city for damage due to his building, or he will abandon it and leave the city to remove it at a later date. The story has yet to be written. You know, I just put on my calendar, I would love to come. Hey, a question. Will they go ahead if that one holdout, the Mystic Bar, continues to hold out? Well, no doubt it costs the city more to do the demolition, but see, all I wanted was appraisal from the building to do it right. Okay, this is from Rob Davis, Megan Galloway, Ken Johnson, Beaver Dam. And I'll show you out right away. I just want to follow up about what we have discussed and what was discussed after you left. Ken felt that we should show them the new floodplain maps that are being worked out on as best available data. They want assurance that the buildings are not removed, will not be subject to the 50% rule. This is why the flood wall comes in. This we cannot do. After the buildings and culverts are moved, the maps profiles will change, but without running them, we do not know how or how much. So, can we show them the new maps now? Also, Ken thought that we could provide them some technical issues, running the model with the buildings and culverts removed to give them an idea of what floodplain would eventually look like, so they knew what structures would still be affected after the buildings or culverts are removed. Is this something that Dean may have some time to do before he retires? Another question, they're required to adopt the dam non-existent profile regardless of the condition of the dam at minimum, and dam failure if the dam gets in bad condition. Well, why would you want the dam in bad condition? Again, this profile most likely would change with the removal of structures or culverts too. Currently, the Wyco is out of the floodplain, and it would be in the proposed floodplain, and when the DFA is adopted. So, this is July 25th, 2008, a month and a half after the flood. So basically, the floodplain maps were done now, but they weren't released till 2012. They wanted to make sure that the building was done. So the Wyco building is now in the floodplain, and it was in the floodplain before I show you how the city even admitted it. Do all this stuff, you know, for this Wyco building, you know, and you look back and you say to yourself, aha. This is another one from Michael Furchild to Rob Davis from the DNR. And I'm just going to read the part that's relevant here. I talked with our floodplain planner in our central office to get clarification. It is not the 100% of the assessed value, it is 100% of the fair market value, which is determined by an appraisal. Of the 100%, 75% would be from FEMA and the other 25% from local funds. As far as the grant permit, I was correct in telling you that the HMGP through FEMA. Hopefully I didn't confuse you too much my breakdown of the grant. Well, the thing you have to look at this, and you know, they knew they need appraisals. But see, Michael's building, Michael Furchild, was damaged from the flood, and they were worried about collapsing. So, would he want an appraisal for his building? So, what would the fair market value be of a building that's ready to collapse in the river, that's been abandoned, there's no occupancy permit? I mean, what would you pay for this building? And with that little bit of land on the river that you couldn't do anything with if you tore it down. So, he definitely did not want, you know, to go through the legal process for appraisals for his building, because it would come back as zero. So, it kind of explains some of that. This is another one from Michael Furchild to Rob Davis. you know, to clarify what's actually going on here. See, Furchow had called these meetings right away first, and I went to a couple of them, and I knew the guy. I didn't trust him. You know, I'm not going to say smart, he's clever. You know what I mean? It would be the word, you know. And one of his things that he always did to the people with the real estate when he bought it, he would always tell the buyer that they owed him extra money. You know, I've heard it from several different people. And he actually helped the city with these deals, you know, with these people. And then he asked them for money, extra money for himself too. He's an amazing guy. This is from Furchow. And then I said to them during the informational meeting, if the culverts were not restricting the flow, then the floor tractors weren't necessary and a waste of money. No, the city is playing a game of part truths. There was no misunderstanding. I told them about the restricted flows earlier in the year. That's when they had a flood in 2004, the first one. My building, the Tower parking lot, Cooper Street Bridge, and they did not take any action and it flooded. They were aware of the flow restriction and in turn party responsible for the excess damage that the floods caused. By altering what you said to them and in telling the victims of flooding, they're trying to remove any fault for damage. During the same meeting, on August 7, 2008, the city also reversed their statement and said, it's not us, it's the DNR. The DNR wants all buildings out of the floodway and the building's owners not be paid anything for their buildings, and the cost for removal would be the owner's responsibility. So the city created an uproar in the community by offering 65% in the draft development plan. Now they're taking a step back and threatening that the big bad DNR may give no compensation to their buildings owners. It's a shame. I understand the law. I'm comfortable with the removal of my building, but I refuse to be lied to by the city and to sell at less than fair market value. In truth, I somewhat feel bad for the DNR as the city is wrongly making them out to be the bad guys. It's like, it's a circus act. I just want it over, but not at a wrongful loss to my family and the families of the other 11 property owners. Yeah, right. I would think the city would want to hide the fact that they blatantly lied to the citizens at the 8/7/08 meeting. I did not know where to turn in consideration the possibility of raising my building. I chose not to clean out the basement and turn back on the electricity and repair the boilers. So the city inspection sent me a nastygram that I have 1 year to get my building back into conforming standard or it will be condemned. Unbelievable. It is unfair, especially considering how much I gave to the city. He tried to, be this big steward of the downtown. But what's interesting about it is to see, I looked on the internet and I found out that if you don't have any economic activity in your building, that they can condemn your building. There's a difference between condemn and condemnation, are two different words. Condemn is like for blighted purposes, and condemnation is the legal process for eminent domain. So in my situation, it came out after a flood, told me I couldn't fix the building. Told me that the 50% rule covered everything. His building was ready to collapse next to mine. I got the letter that said that they were applying for a grant. So I was in a situation where, I knew the law. They needed to give me appraisal, relocation first, give you appraisal, they get an appraisal, and they determine what they call fair market value for your property. I knew the law, but I had no idea that all these people from the city, the state, the DNR were this corrupt. I had no possible idea. So that's why I applied for my historical status, because I did that because I knew I could fix my building if I did that, which cost me a bundle of money and time. But when I found out later, I wouldn't have done that. So that's what makes this story so bad. It's just the amount of level that they went to go through all this. This is from Michael Furchow to Rob Davis, of course. It says, the city stressed that it is the DNR that is pressing all floodway properties to remove from the river. So they want reassurance that it's not the big bad DNR pushing the issue. Yes, it is a law, but there's no time limit. Also, the city has maintained that the culvert had no effect on flooding. It's kind of the same as the other one. So that's Rob Davis, and but the big thing you got to come out of this is, see, he knew that the Weichel building was in there. He knew that they didn't get this letter from them. He knew they couldn't develop that building. but he kind of wanted to see what he can get returned. You know? Okay, this is another one from Rob Davis to Michael Furchow again. Working together. Says, any new action yet taken by the city relative to the culverts or the floodway properties? I've heard nothing, but ever since the Wyco building was cleared. So they must have sent a letter that said that it's not in the floodplain, even though it was at that time. I think the other properties are off the radar. I will be at the meeting next week, Monday. I assume that you will be in your opinion. Is the city required to protect the lives and properties of their people from possible harm? You would hope so, but the way they operated, you know. And this is another thing too, which I figured out. I went down underneath there, looked at the pillars, and I said, holy shit, there's no way any water can get through there. Basically, they enlarged there are 8 pilings under 205. That was the building past mine where the water came by. Were grossly enlarged from 20 inches, 48 inches. The prior owner was informed by inspection survey that no repair was required. The enlarged pilings and other existing altered resist water 20-25%. I showed you that picture of the pillars, how they made them so big. And that basically, if you want to read that, you can go ahead and pause it and click it. But it basically talks about the pillars, and they did cause, you know, it's what they call it. They increased the velocity and altered the flow of the water. This is matters of consideration about the culverts in the city. The culverts were installed. This is one of Furchow's things that he wrote to the city to try to, you know, persuade them to help him. The culverts were installed by the city of Beaver Dam, and some liability may be the city's extent of damages caused by the floods. DNR has no record of any permit obtained by the city for the installation of the culverts, construction of the parking lot, nor making alterations to the river. The flow analysis by the DNR, the city did determine the culverts were a cause for additional flow restrictions, and removal of them would result in a drop excuse me, of 1.7 feet. Okay, so the DNR has notified the city that the culverts and any structures over the river are illegal per the Wisconsin statute. And then on the enforcement down the bottom, it says, the inspection department bears the responsibility to make certain that the ordinance is followed. And then inspection department, the city has received notification that the DNR that the model floodplain ordinance has not been properly reinforced. One thing I forgot too is they didn't release the floodplain maps till the 12th, 2012. They had them done. The DNR had preliminary ones in 2008. But actually, the floodplain maps, well, I showed you, they're basically nothing because they said that the dam was removed. So that removed everybody from the floodplain too. But it also allowed for the Wyco development. This is a just compensation clause. This is what he put in his letter of understanding to the consideration to the city. So he knew that the property owners were entitled to appraisals. You'll see here. The just compensation clause, also known as the takings clause of the Wisconsin Constitution, requires the state and the subdivisions to pay just compensation for any property taken for the use or benefit of the public. Also implicit in the provision that the government has the power to take property over the public only for public use. The government may not take private property for private use. This section has never been amended. Wisconsin's just compensation provision is similar to the provision of the Fifth Amendment, you know, which is basis law. So you must pay just compensation for any property taken, not blackmail them out of their property. And then this is for the municipal flood control grants. I'll show you that. And a resolution on here, most, if not all, floodway property owners will this is what he says, and because he was like their head negotiator. He helped these people, you know what I mean? If you call it help. I think he helped himself more than anything. Resolution, financial. Most of, not all the floodway property owners will waive their relocation entitlement. Most, if not all, the floodway property owners are asking for their fair market value of the 2008 assessed value equalized assessment ratio. That's basically your assessed value for your taxes purposes. The economic access to TIP benefits afforded to other downtown developers. And then the damages, most if not all floodway property owners will sign up and hold the city harmless against the city on all matters relative to the acquisition of the property in the past flooding or discrimination. Yeah. So the people thought that he was helping them, and he didn't fool me, and he was looking out for himself. He got his flood wall. He didn't get appraisal for the buildings, which was required for the relocation plan, which they did, and the whole story was on and on. But I just thought I'd share that with you because he went on the radio and the paper and said some terrible things about me, and it really affected my business because people thought that, between the city and the DNR threats and everything, that Jay Hafe was this terrible person. But I wasn't. I knew the law. I just had no idea everybody was this corrupt. And I'm sorry, folks, but thank you. The best.